House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi catching heat for these comments about the economy under President Trump.
Hip, hip, hooray, unemployment is down. What does that mean to me in my life? I need a bigger paycheck. This isn't just about the unemployment rate. It's about wages rising in our country so that consumer confidence is restored.
Senator Bernie Sanders also lashing out against the president.
Trump campaigned, he said, you remember this, I will not cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. Believe me, I'm not Paul Ryan. That's what he said. His budget, $1 trillion cut in Medicaid proposal, $500 billion in Medicare, massive cuts in education, nutrition programs. He's going to war against working people.
So, Jesse, if new Fox News poll out shows President Trump, I think, at 44, which might be at their highest. He's been in that poll. And the key driver for the president is handling of the economy. There you see it on the screen. I think it was 52%. So what do you make of the fact that leading Democrats, Pelosi, Sanders, others, are like, well, what about wages?
What about wages, Juan? I remember just the other day you said something about wages being flat under this president.
Yeah, I think it's 0.3%.
Nope, that would be 2.9%,
no.
Close to 3%, and that is the fastest rise in wage growth since 2009.
What are you talking about?
And it's my pleasure to fact check you.
Yeah.
Also, consumer confidence.
0.3 is the last thing I saw on wages.
I'm talking about since he's been president, wages have been up close to 3%.
Okay. All right.
And that's a fact. So, also consumer confidence, it is an 18-year high. So I don't know what Pelosi's talking about. When you combine that with, oh, whoop-de-doo, the jobless numbers are down, and crumbs, and MS-13, they have a spark of dignity inside them. Those are just made-to-order Republican ads. Gutfeld was laughing in the break about it. I mean, she could not cut a better ad for the Republicans than she has so far. Nancy? We love you.
So, Kimberly,
yes.
Bernie Sanders says this is a war on working people being waged by the president who wants to. He said he would never cut Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. But in fact, his budgets look intent on doing just that.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think Bernie Sanders has been having too many, cafeteria lunches with Nancy Pelosi because both of them seem to be getting kind of confused. But it's actually their comments are really only helping to motivate the president's base. And when you look at the numbers, I mean, it just flies in the face of their illogical comments and statements. When you see an economy that's booming like this, you see that women, minorities, blacks, all more engaged in the economy. You see the numbers in terms of jobs available, record low unemployment. This is something that America wanted. This is why he was elected. And you see here somebody like Nancy Pelosi seems completely out of touch, doesn't make any sense, one gaffe after the next. If that's the future, right, of the Democratic Party, they're in big trouble going into the midterm elections and going into 2020. That's the problem. When you look at this right now, people are saying, look, this is something that's sustainable in terms of economic growth. The Democrats are out of talking points, but they're not out of gaffes.
So, Dana, again, going back to the polling, what you see coming from Pelosi is an argument that when people don't have wages, they can't afford health care. They can't pay the high cost of prescription drugs. They can't pay for their kids to go to college. Are we seeing the evolution here of the Democrats messaging for
I think that this is consistent across the board. It's not like she's making gaffes.
Right.
Okay, they are actually spending money on ads in their primaries that are saying the same thing. So something is telling them, either their polling or their focus groups are telling them that this message works for their particular voters. And one of the things about this that the Republicans just need to be a little bit concerned about is that the president's numbers are better, the generic ballot is better, but the Democrats are highly motivated to register new voters. I didn't know this until the other day. In the Virginia election for the gubernatorial race last November, more Republicans turned out to vote than in the history of the country in Virginia. And still Ed Gillespie lost by 9 points. One of the things that happened is 12% of the voters in that election had never voted in a gubernatorial election before. So the Democrats are very good at figuring out where to go and register new voters and getting them to the polls. No matter what the economic results are, they can get their people to the polls more than Republicans, then they could actually squeak out a win in November.
Sounds like voter fraud.
Amen. By the way, Dana, in the Fox poll now, it's back to +9 for the Democrats in terms of generic preference. So, you know, Greg, I was looking at the polls, and it's
Here now, Andrew McCarthy, former federal prosecutor and National Review contributing editor, and Judith Miller, former New York Times reporter. She spent 85 days in jail protecting her rights as a member of the press. She is also a Fox News contributor. Judith, let me start with you on this. What's your take? Because every reporter tries to find sources who will give them information about what's going on. At this point, it doesn't appear that that was classified information. So what do you think?
Well, Martha, my friends and former colleagues at the New York Times say that this was just an outrageous invasion of Ali Rutkin's privacy, that they seized her metadata it basically erodes the understanding that was reached between the press and Eric Holder when he was Attorney General. The Justice Department says that is not so, that they scrupulously followed those guidelines. They did not invade her privacy or go after her metadata just for the heck of it, and that there were national security grounds for doing so. It's hard to know what the truth is in this case because we don't know what kind of national security information was compromised. I obviously, as a member of the press, feel strongly that since Attorney General Sessions has threatened us and threatened to put more reporters in jail to stop leaks, one has to be suspicious. And we know that in my case, for example, no national security information was compromised. The FBI and the Justice Department were trying to make a political case, but we don't know enough yet, at least I don't, to draw a conclusion in this case.
Yeah, Judith talks about the metadata material, which essentially meant that they were able to track if her phone number was discussing anything with his phone number, but not the actual content of what was going back and forth. So they know that they were contacting each other. Andrew, what do you think?
Well, you know, Martha, as Catherine said, these are interests that have to be balanced. The government has a very important interest here. The leaking of classified information has been outrageous, going back to before the time that Trump was sworn into office. And at the same time, we have to have a free, robust press. And I think Judy's case, for example, is a cautionary tale of what happens when you have a case that isn't meritorious enough to use this kind of extreme measure that the government has. On the other hand, having had over the years to apply these guidelines, you do have to make a balancing. And the fact of the matter is, in the jurisprudence of the First Amendment, the journalist is not given a privilege, at least much of one, above and beyond what the normal person has in terms of privacy. So I think you have to balance, is there a very serious case? Is the journalist somehow implicated in it, either as somebody who witnessed it, who's somebody who's participated in it? And is it a situation where only the journalist has information that the prosecutor needs in order to make this serious case? If you can't check all those boxes, we shouldn't even be talking about this.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of this obviously goes back to trying to figure out how the information came out that led to the investigation and the Russia investigation. And that was one of the things that the president wants to learn more about. Carter Page was one of the stories that she wrote about. And I know, Andrew, you believe that there's, sort of an anti-Trump bias in what you see coming from Mr. Wolf, who we should point out, Judy, has been working on the Senate Intel Committee for decades, and he had a lot of access to classified information as he brought in witnesses. I mean, he had a very high-level clearance in all of this.
Absolutely, but Martha, he's not being charged with leaking classified information.
No.
He's being charged with lying to the FBI. So it's very hard to know what the national security interests here that are supposedly being jeopardized are. I think as a journalist, and we all have to be suspicious of the government's motives. On the other hand, it's also interesting to me that, as the government pointed out, she was the only reporter whose records were seized. The other three reporters, that wasn't the case.
And it may be, Andrew, as they dig into this, that perhaps there was an issue of classified information. We just don't know that yet. I mean, they basically were able to nail him down in terms of the interactions that he had with this reporter. He claims that he never released any classified information.
Well, I think also, Martha, it's possible that the case has been charged in a strategic way by charging it as a 3-count false statements case.